right, welcome back from the bench. We are excited to keep this conversation going, but we are even more excited to have our first guest coach in Grace Ricafranca, who's our assistant coach at Pepperdine University. Grace, welcome to the show. Why don't you just talk to us about your story, your background, what led you to Pepperdine?
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'm a huge fan of From the Bench. You guys are awesome, doing great conversations. So I feel honored to be here and be part of this. But yeah, a little bit about my story. I started off coaching high school basketball, actually right after I graduated high school. Very unique situation that happened, but I really wasn't sure about career paths at that point in time. I knew I loved basketball. I wasn't sure if I wanted to play at the next level, what that would look like. I had an opportunity to go to Biola University for free, thanks to the work of my mother, who actually still works there at Biola. So when that opportunity came up, free education, I kind of took that path, but also knew I really wanted to stay involved with basketball somehow. And so when I was given that opportunity to kind of coach at my alma mater, I really seized it and actually ended up enjoying it. I loved it. And for me, it was an opportunity, I think, to kind of just implement things that I wish I had experienced in the program. We struggled. We weren't very good back in the day. A lot of us loved basketball, but just I think we struggled with honestly development. I think uniquely in my kind of journey of coaching, I've always kind of entered programs that were struggling, either middle of the pack or lower end. And so for me, it's always been a passion for how can we develop them as players? How can we get to a level to compete well with the top teams in the conference? And so, we went from finishing, I believe it was probably like fourth or fifth in the conference. And then kind of the next summer, we won our summer league. And then we ended up actually tying for first place the following year, which was really exciting because it's just something that our program just hasn't done in a long time. And so for me, I always saw that really starting with player development. And that's always been kind of my first passion when it comes to the game. So I was really fortunate to move to Whittier Christian High School, became an interim head coach there after a couple of years, and then kind of stayed connected with the coaches at Biola. And so after graduating from Biola, they offered me a position to be an assistant coach there. And so spent a year under Bethany Miller, who then became the AD at Biola. She's currently still the AD. And they hired Alan Nakamura as the head coach. And he decided to take a chance with me and keep me on board. And so I actually served with him for another 4 years. And kind of worked my way up a little bit with him, and kind of ended up becoming a bit of a lead assistant my last year or two there at Biola. But the focus has always really been for me player development and really trying to find ways for our girls to kind of stay competitive but grow their skills. I just think that's the situation that I've always been placed in, but just feel fortunate to have experienced that. And I think player development has taken a lot of different meanings. I think at first it was very much X's and O's and very much how can we get them to score, all these things. But now what I'm realizing as I kind of am growing older, a lot of player development is also kind of their leadership abilities. It's also how good of a teammate they are. It's also, it's also what are the intangibles that they kind of need in order to be successful at this level. So that's kind of what I've been brought in to do. And thankfully, through networking, through recruiting, actually, I met Kristen Dowling, and we actually stayed good friends. She ended up recruiting a young lady that I mentored. So we really stayed connected, and she would come to our games. I would come to some of her games. And through that, I think she just knew who I was as a person and as a coach. And so when the opportunity arose, she she offered me a position on her staff, and I couldn't say no. So I was really excited to join and to be able to learn, and be at, this level, and also be surrounded by coaches that are experienced, that are seasoned, and be part of a program that I could help continue to grow. So that's kind of how I ended up at Pepperdine. And yeah, season 2 coming up. So I'm excited.
Well, we are grateful and excited that you are here with us, and we are also excited that Sam is coming on next. So let's take a break, and we'll bring Sam back and get into it.
All right, everyone, welcome back to our second segment, our guest segment. We're excited to have Sam Allen on with us, who is one of the preeminent player development people in the country, in my opinion. I've got to get to know him through a former colleague of mine, Lisa O'Mara, and their work with Key 5 coaching. And so, Sam, really appreciate you being on with us and spending some time. I know you have about 30 minutes, but this topic of player development is one we haven't dove into yet, but it's something that's near and dear to all of us, and all of us as assistants and head coaches have believed in it. So we appreciate you being on with us. To start off with, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your story and just kind of, how you got to be where you are right now, and some of your work with player development over the years. So let you just run with that. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Jesse, and thanks, guys, for having me. I'm going to talk fast and want to cover a lot of ground here. So, I mean, when you and I spoke last night, Jesse, I was thinking, like, you said, hey, share some of your story, and maybe, I don't know why, I just automatically had this vision. I remember going back playing in my very first basketball game as a 9-year-old at the YMCA. I don't know why, I just thought, and I probably hadn't thought of that in quite some time. And but I just, probably like you guys, I love the game so much. And, we have to be reminded, I think, sometimes that it goes back to that childhood love, and don't let that leave you. And I think at times it could, because you get caught up in the business of basketball, or your profession, or trying to win the next game. So, I'm from Atlanta, where I live now, and, played high school ball here. And I was very fortunate to play for a high school coach. He's still coaching his day. He's 38 years in. He's won, like 9 state championships and had a ton of success, and I think back, I was really fortunate just to play for somebody like him who taught me the game, because I wouldn't be on this call right now if I didn't, play for him. And so I went on and played 4 years of college ball, and then coached in college for almost 10 years, and then now run a player development organization here in Atlanta, where we do training for, anywhere from a youth player all the way up to college, or sometimes professional, and everything in between, as well as working with PGC and Key 5 is a new endeavor we just started a year ago, helping coaches. So I'll stop with this final story, to give a prelude to like our conversation about player development, why this matters a lot to me. So when I was in 9th grade, and it's funny because through my office doors, I have a couple of my guys that are in Division II ball right now, and they're going to hear this. They've heard this story 14 times probably. But when I was in 9th grade, I was a 30-30 guy. And I'll ask players, what a 30-30? And they're like, average 30 points, 30 assists. And I'm like, no. That's when you go in the game when you're up 30 or you're down 30. That was me when 9th grade. And I was the 3rd string point guard. We had 3 of them. That means they thought I was the worst point guard in the whole program. And of course, you're sitting on the bench, and I see like from the bench, so it resonates here. It's like, I thought I should have been starting. I thought I was better than the dude in front of me, or the two. I know I was better than the 2nd string. At least I thought. Well, I learned it didn't really matter what I thought, right? It only mattered what the coach thought. And the reality was I wasn't good enough, and coaches want to win, and they want to. But my coach, who I was telling you about earlier on that, I can still remember this, sitting in the corner office of the gym, and him saying, he's one of these like guys who doesn't say much. So when he does talk, you listen, and he's like, there's no fluff. It's just boom, hit you with it very direct. He said, Sam, if you want to be a player, you gotta get better, skill wise, you gotta get stronger, you gotta get faster. I left out of that office that day and I made a commitment that, I was going to go work for this thing. I was going to put in the time. I started working 6-7 days a week, working on my game, working on, lifting weights and training my body and my mind. And you don't know it in that moment. You look back years later and know that was a pivotal moment. That was a light bulb moment, a life defining moment. And because of that experience of going to a gym and just putting in the work, that you can make something out of yourself. It really changed my whole life. The game changed, it's opened up so many doors in so many ways, and some of my strongest relationships are from the game. And so that's why I get really passionate when I'm on the court with players, because I know it's a moment that, how important a role I can play in hopefully directing their life. Maybe they're already going in the right direction, so I'm just there to help push them along, or maybe I'm redirecting, and trying, maybe they're headed this way, and if I can get their heart and their mind, I can redirect them in a way that's going to change their life. And I know sometimes you're just going in and doing a shooting workout, but I think every moment to me is a moment that you can do that. So I'll stop there. Sorry for the long monologue.
No, that's perfect, and we love stories on the show. It's a passion, and B-Row is such a great facilitator of that. So we appreciate you sharing. That's a gem. The 30 up, 30 down. I think we all can appreciate that. So I would like, you kind of started to go down that path, and I'll start with, when you go into a player development session, let's say it's a one-on-one session, what is your intention with the environment that you're creating in that moment? Like as you go into that session, you're looking at, okay, what's my right now? I think that's something that coaches learn, like that you have probably, we talked about intentional coaching and training coaching, but when you go into a specific workout, maybe just give us a little the intention that you go into that session.
Okay. Yeah. So for an individual workout, I'll give you the model that we use. And, like I'm going to be on court later today with some teams, like we have travel ball teams, and then working with a high school team. So that if I'm working with a team, it's going to be, what does that high school coach want? And then I'm going to plan out the practice plan and the training session that fits those outcomes. But an individual session, Jesse, is so we use a 3D philosophy, because I don't want to impose what I want for that player. I want to find out what they want. And the 3D is this: dream, direction, and discipline. First, what are your dreams and goals? So before we ever dribble, pass, or shoot a basketball, I'm going to have a conversation with them. It could be 15 minutes. It could bleed into 30 minutes. And we're going to talk about, what are your dreams and goals? Because once I know that, then I can coach you and train you according to your aspirations. If they just want to, if they're there because their mom made them be there, or they're there because they just, want to play good on this Friday night, that's different than they tell me they want to be a Division I player. Or, so I'm going to, hopefully, meet them where they're at. And so we start there. And then the direction is, what direction are you headed? And I stole this from Andy Stanley, who's our pastor here in Atlanta, the church I go to. And so I put my own little spin. But, if you guys are more West Coast guys, I believe. But like here in Atlanta, there's an Interstate 85 that runs from Florida up into the Georgia, North Carolina. If I get on 85 North and I'm going to the beach with my family and I got them packed in the back and we're ready to go, I got my swim trunks on, doesn't matter how bad I want to get there, I ain't making it to Florida. I'm going to North Carolina. And so I think this happens with players, is they want this certain goal, yet their habits and actions aren't lining up with that direction. So we talk about, okay, the direction is the plan. You want to be a 40% three-point shooter? Okay, well, we got to get up X number of shots every day, or 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, and that would go back to their dreams. Okay, if you want to be this, okay, this is what it looked like. But I'm just simply giving them information, hoping to inspire them. There's going to be some talks and accountability, but they're going to get it because they get it. And then the last one is discipline. And so, like, do you have the discipline to carry out your direction? I'm trying to give you a microwave version here of it, but that's essentially the model we use. So that I find to be effective and have been using for the last several years.
That's perfect. That's perfect. That's a great overview. Thank you so much. Gav, go ahead.
Awesome. Player development for me, especially in the off season, is one of my favorite things of my job. A lot of times during the season, I don't get that opportunity to work with some of our guards. I'm responsible for the posts. But here at Utah, we do a great job of all of our kids get coached by everybody. And a lot of times in an individual type setting. So there'll be days where we get to have the privilege to be in the gym for 4 hours instead of at a computer screen. And that's something I love. But I also know that there are, especially in the college ranks, there sometimes is a misconception of skill development trainers, personal trainers, and those type of things, because a lot of coaches want that total control of their team. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we're restricted by how much we get to access these kids, especially in the off season. So we've been blessed with, like, our kids have, player development trainers where they'll work out with us 4 hours a week during the off season. But that's only a small fraction of the week, right? So where do you get better? So we love it. And we actually encourage our kids, hey, if you guys want to explore that route, definitely do so. But what my question to you is, what are some of the misconceptions that you may hear? And this is like your chance to convince maybe college coaches how much of an important role that you could be in that player's overall development.
Yeah, it's a really good question. There's a lot of different ways we could go with it, because I have a ton of thoughts I can get on my soapbox about this. Look, I'm in the basketball trainer world, right? Like, so that's what I'm in now. Previously I was coaching in college, so I look at it, or I want to look at it through the lens of the coach. Like, and so it's just, there's a basketball trainer on every street corner, like, especially here in Atlanta. Like, when I started back in 2011, I could count, I believe, on like one hand how many there were. And that thing's exploded in the last 10 years. And so I think when I hear trainers are like, that's my guy, that's my girl, or they worked with a pro player one time, and then on the Twitter bio it says NBA skills trainer. Like, it's funny, but, and that sounds really judgmental, so forgive me for a second. So I think what's really important is when the player does go back to that skills, and players do have, and you guys know this, I'm telling you something, it's like they have like 4 or 5 different coaches now. Like, a high school kid, when I came up, there was really one voice. It was the high school coach. Now you're competing with the travel ball coach, the high school coach, the trainer. They might have a second trainer on deck when things don't go, like, so there's just multiple voices. It's hard as a player. And the problem is that player is hearing 4 different things of what they need to work on. So ideally, the trainer is working in conjunction with the high school coach, and they're actually watching film or know how they're being utilized in that system. So you don't go work on your 8 dribble step back combo move that you just won't shoot in a game. And that does for the IG celebrity trainers out there that have 100, like, I see a lot of these advanced moves that not even high level college players, like snaking ball screens into step backs, like, you don't even see that coverage. So why are you, now there is an element, Gavin and coaches, like, where you're training them for the role they're in, yet you're also preparing them for an advanced role that they want to grow into. And so that's another part of the conversation, right? But the trainer needs to get on the page with the coach. The coach doesn't need to get on the page with the trainer. I think really good trainers, they work in conjunction, or at least make an effort. Now, some coaches don't reciprocate either, and in that case, but at least you made the intention behind it. And then let's just work on, back in my shirt, you guys can't see it, it says master the boring. Like, I really believe that you got to master the boring, the basics, the stuff that catch and shoot. Like, I was talking with my guys this morning about this. It's like, what do the majority of shots come from in basketball? Good teams. I'm talking about good teams. Like, they just at the end of a pass, so no dribble, or a rip and 1 or 2 dribble pull up, or at the rim, or shot fake. Like, very rarely is it going to be off of 3 or more dribbles. Yet the trainer world would tell you differently. Now, I don't know if I answered your question because I get excited there. Because I could keep going. I mean, I got a major soapbox to stand on that one.
No, that was good. That was awesome.
I think I understand exactly what you're saying, because I'm thinking the same thing. Like, as a coach, you work with, you get kids that when you come to college and they've worked with a trainer and all that, and they can do all these, 6, 7 dribble moves. But if you don't play that way, then that doesn't really do anything for you. And number 2, they're doing 2 or 6 or 7 dribble moves against cones or air, and there's nobody guarding them. So I guess what is the, in your opinion, what is or how do you build your workouts based on that, versus a skill versus having to make a decision versus defense?
Okay, yeah, great question, Tony. And yeah, spent a lot of time and thought on this, and an application is, there's a big movement, I think, behind the game. Let's call it the games approach. I'm sure you're familiar with, where I think a lot of games approach coaching has become even more popular, and rightfully so. But there's that community of coaches who kind of, I think, bang on the skills trainer on air, like we call it the on air approach, where there's no defense or the cone or the chair. I believe a marriage of both is where the magic is, because, and we did a segment, I don't know if you guys caught it, with Key 5 called Courtside back a couple months ago. We had 11 different interviews. One of them was Jenny Busek, who's assistant for the Mavs. And, she's working with Luka Doncic and Porzingis and all these, the best of the best. And she said something that I long have believed, which is, the game is the great teacher. And I'm in the trainer world, and I run a business, and, there's revenue streams that I get from somebody paying me to work. But I do believe it is the best skill development is pick up basketball. That's where you learn to play. You learn how to finish. You're a small guy, finish against bigger players, how to be crafty, how to hold off the defender, how to protect the ball control, how to make passes in tight spaces. And so, Tony, to kind of close out my thought here is, I think it's important. I use a lot of games approach. So I like a lot of 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4, 5-on-5. But not just play, but use restrictions within the game, dribble limits, or you can only shoot at the rim or catch and shoot threes. That way we're working on attacking, we're working on space in the floor. And if we have individual players come into BCB, we'll work with them individually, but we want to load them into group training as quickly as possible so they can apply the skill, because I've coached players who are great on the cone, they're great on the chair, but they don't have arms and defenders. And I believe, and I'll end with this note, is I believe the greatest skill is competing. I think that is a skill. I lump that into a technical skill like shooting, ball handling, passing, finishing. I believe competing. And so I really want, in what as a coach, a trainer, to draw that out of kids and teach them. But I want to create the environment and let the environment be the teacher, if that makes sense.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think that's one of the things and reasons I kind of asked you that was because I think I've seen kids that are great with their trainer. You put them on a court with other people and they don't know what to do. They stand because they don't know what to do because they don't ever play with other people. And then obviously, philosophically, the game is about making quick decisions, right? As the game happens. So, the more you can put your players in positions to make quick decisions with the skill build that like you're talking about. And I think you put them in better positions to succeed. So as you're explaining that stuff, how often do you see like people get like in a, like they do the drill in a vacuum, they do the drill to do the drill versus trying to score or whatever?
You mean Say that again. Make sure I understood that.
Say like you're working on a skill or whatever, and maybe they're getting good at it, but they're running the drill to run the drill versus envisioning playing against people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's a goal or the role of a trainer to I think a lot of trainers, and I was just in a gym last week, and I'm going to it here in a minute, where they have this professional player as their trainer at this facility. Their current they're obviously home with this whole pandemic. Being a great player doesn't mean you're going to be a great coach. And I see this often. Great college player hired in as a coach. Great former NBA or I have a couple of former high-level, SEC players on my staff. And, we talk about it, but it doesn't, just because they play in the SEC or they play in the WNBA, doesn't mean they're going to be able to teach it. It just means you were a great player who now wears the title of a coach. And so it's important to know, I say that to lead into this, which is a trainer needs to teach, a lot of trainers teach the what. Hey, go to the cone, do this move, and then go shoot a left-handed layup. It has no context. What's your why? Why am I using this move? And when would I use it in the game? And then can you break it down into the how, what it is, why are we doing it? When would I use it? And then how do we break it down in micro skills if it's a little bit more advanced? Okay, we're going to do a spin move, finishing move, where now I got to teach them dribble, drop, close. So I break it down into phrases, catchy terminology so they can, it connects, and then they can do it. So yeah, I think the missing components are the whys and the wins to do it. And so then players, I see it more. I don't know if you guys see this. I see it more over the last 10 years than ever. Predetermined moves, because the trainer told them to do that, and it's like they had the guy beat. He's on your hip. Why did you just go between the legs? Because been overtrained. So there's just no context. So we do have, I believe we're in a state where there's more skilled players than ever before. I really believe that. Like this game, like some of what these NBA guys, WNBA girls can do is amazing. Like they really have the skill. I just don't think they have the decision making that goes along with it, because that's left out oftentimes. And that's skill and reads or skill and decisions, they're not mutually exclusive. They have to be brought together. Y'all got me fired up. This is fun. I wish we could go for another hour.
Sam, thanks so much for that. I think going on with that, I think that thought of, integrating skills and drills within the game. How often as a trainer are you kind of correcting them and breaking things down or stopping drills versus letting them learn through the drill, if that makes sense? I think there's a tendency, I think, for coaches, especially like early on, to stop things like immediately as it happens. How do you kind of decipher when to stop a drill, correct something immediately versus to let it play out and kind of let them learn from either mistakes or what they did well? If you can kind of speak a little bit to that.
No, I love that question, Grace, because it is an important one, and one for coaches to be thinking a lot about. I know when I first started when I started blue collar basketball back in 2011, I was so detailed, and I would stop them in the middle of the rep. No, do it again. Not do it right. Like I've learned that I had some aha moments. Here's one aha moment. I coached guys for most of my life, and then the last 6-7 years have now coached girls or trained girls. And I used to have the best drills. If you guys came to my practice, man, they were so organized and disciplined. And I had other coaches that would come watch and say nice things about it. And then we got into the first tournament, and we just took it. We took it like we were down 20-2, and those drills didn't look so good. That team came out pressuring and and like all my nice little drills. And so I think the important thing I learned was practice ugly. We don't have to be pretty. And basketball's chaotic, and practices need to simulate that. And so to Grace, to go specifically to your answer is, yes, I'm more comfortable letting them learn as long as they are thinking. A lot of players, I think, just do it and they don't learn from what just happened. So I want them to be a student. Like I tell, when they're shooting, be a student of your shot. How did you miss? And then make the adjustment. Because I want, if I'm doing my job, that a great teacher becomes less important, right? I think great coaches become less important over the year, so your role in October is going to be bigger, but if you've done your job come February, March, they don't need you. You don't need to call timeout to talk through it. And same goes with a trainer. And so there's a philosophy, or here's a teaching methodology approach that I've come to like, and here it is. It's a 3-part step. It's 1, observe, experiment, teach. Observe, experiment, teach. That means, say I'm teaching them a sweep over move with a left hand finish. I would do it myself. I mean, if you're a trainer watching and you maybe you're not an active trainer where you can physically do it, but you might just show them. But you show them, let them observe the coach or a player doing it, and say, hey, just watch me. You don't even have to say much. Let it be 30-second demo. Send them out, have them work for 3-4 minutes on their own, and you don't even do anything. They're experimenting. Then you bring them back in and you say, all right, let me teach you a few of these teaching points, and you give them 2 or 3. I mean, that could get into the whole methodology of how do we load in skills, but that way they've gotten to fail, they've gotten to learn on their own. Whereas before, I may have taken more of the approach, here's the drill, here's why you're doing it, here's when you're doing it, here's your 4 teaching points. I might have given them 8 teaching points and they didn't even remember, to brush their teeth this morning. So it's like, I don't want to load them up too much and let them learn as they go.
Right. Love that.
So I have a question. I think this is a generational thing. Back in the day, when it was very limited with hours, and oftentimes workouts were 40 minutes to make it work throughout the week and whatnot. So can you give us an example how you build out your workout? And you could generalize it or whatnot, but how, like, what are the percentage of time that you focus on in each particular skill set that you might be focused on, or maybe go, like, just give us a picture of what a week looks like and how you break that down.
Yeah. So my answer is yes, like yes to everything. I think it does, and I'm not being, maybe that sounds sarcastic, but I think it's a good question, Brian, because, all right, here's 3 things I think, most workouts should have, which is skill component, physical component, and mental component. We should be training skill, and we should be training a physical, like, working on our conditioning and body. And then the mental, which is an underrated skill that's taught. You say, how much of the game of basketball is mental? Somebody will say 80%, 90%. And you say, well, how much of the time do you spend training? And they'll say 0, 5, 10. Like, I think it's just a thread that runs throughout, at least in my approach. And so it goes back to the individual player. For me, Brian, is what do they need to get better at? And so I have a Division III college player I'm working with right now, who he's going into his senior year. We're not attacking his weaknesses. Like, some people say, well, get better at your weak. No, not now. Like, we need to be, this is Phil Beckner, good friend of mine who y'all maybe heard of Phil, but he's Damian Lillard's trainer and college coach. He says, be great at what you're good at. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. So with Mikey, this guy that I'm working with, we're trying to just get his 3-point shooting better. And we're working a little bit on, he's an inside out foreman, so we're working a little bit on his right and left hook. We're not trying to teach him 14 different post moves. We just want, and so those are the things. And I'm in communication with his college coach, and he wants to do a little bit more DHOs and have him on the perimeter some. So now we're incorporating a little bit of ball handling, but we keep it really simple, and it's a less is more, not more is more. I think that's a mistake that's made a lot of times, that we try to get better at 12 things. Let's just get better at 1 thing today. So sometimes a workout might just be straight shooting, which I think's, behind competing, probably the next top skill.
And really quick, I know you're backed up a little bit. You got 2
Yeah.
minutes. But I think it's very unique that you said, what you talked about with trainers as it relates to even what we know about Kobe's workouts, right? And until his documentary comes out, we probably won't know truly what he actually did, but he focused on a lot of the fundamentals and just the releases. So I appreciate you confirming kind of what the feel is as it relates to just even workouts and just getting better.
Yeah, I know we're wrapping up. One thing on Kobe is, I use him and Michael Jordan as two examples. Like, they were able to have success later in their career because they did master the boring. They had impeccable footwork. They took such attention to detail. Kobe had his summer of threes where he just shot 1,000 threes a day because he wanted to prove that. Then Mike D'Antoni got hired for the Lakers, and then he worked on his ball screen because he had a heavy ball screen. That speaks to, and that's the last thing I would say, is players become players because of them, not because of me. I can help you and I will help you, but you're going to become a great player because of the time you put in the driveway or the empty gym, and I need to be less important. And I think that's another thing. There's an ego-driven world with this trainer world. It's like claiming players. They all work under me, and you played a part in it, but they became I worked with a lot of players. I got some that become really good because they wanted it. I got some that you never heard of because they didn't put the work in. All right, I'm getting excited again.
I think you, Sam, appreciate it. It was a whirlwind, and there was so much good stuff in there. And I think you just bookend how you start. You talked a lot about, like, you said, hey, I'm going to be intentional about the beginning. I'm going to find out what makes that kid tick and what they want. And then you just finished with, they're going to be good because they want to be good. And I'm just here to be that vehicle. So you really just bookend the session for us so brilliantly there. Appreciate it. I know you got a jet. Thank you for your time. Where can we find you? Where can people reach out to you real quick before you go? What's the best way to get a hold of you if people want to jump out and spend some more time with you?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram, probably more on Twitter for basketball stuff, but Coach Sam Allen, if this triggered any questions, whoever's listening, direct message me on there, and I'll, we'll set up an email and talk, and, I connect with a lot of coaches that way. And so, if we want to do a part two, I'm down for it too, if it serves. So.
For sure. Thank you so much, Sam. Appreciate your time today, and safe travels as you go off to your next thing. Thank you so much again.
Thanks, guys. Really enjoyed it. Next time I want to learn from you guys. I get to ask questions.
Back to From the Bench. Wanted to make sure we thanked again Sam Allen for coming on the show today and talking player development, skill development, and the marriage between your skill development and your coaching staff, and how important that is. I think one of the things that he mentioned was be good at the boring stuff. And it takes me back to a story from Coach Wooden where he used to compliment Bill Walton. And he said, one of the things that made Bill Walton maybe one of the greatest college basketball player of all time was that he just never got bored at doing the boring stuff. He never got tired of doing the mic and drill. He never got tired of doing any other kind of rebounding ball. Like, he just never got tired of the things that a lot of people think are boring. And I guess, Grace, that kind of it makes me want to push a question to you saying, I think observationally at times, coaches during their player development sometimes get bored themselves with what maybe it is that they're doing with their players, even though that's a skill that they need to get better at. How would you recommend a coach go about dealing with that specific situation where maybe it's a fairly common skill that the player needs to get better at, but as a coach, you want to move on to other things that are maybe more exciting to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, especially in this day and age, right? I mean, everything is so instant. Everything is like, well, if I don't like this, I could go here. Or, hey, like, if I want something, I could get it right now. And so I think really it's a mentality. It starts there. I think it's, these kids understand. I think I love what Sam said about kind of always bringing it back to the goals and the dreams, right? And I think I think something else that he kind of hit on as well is kind of pointing back to success. I think, these young players have to understand and see what success looks like and be able to kind of have those examples of, okay, what did they do? What did they do that made them successful? And then can I myself see myself in that same mentality, in that same routine, in that same buy-in? And a lot of times it is the boring stuff. But for me, I think it's honestly a preaching to oneself of the necessity of it. From a skills development trainer, Cody Toper, he's with University of Memphis, I think right now. I was listening to a clinic that he did, but he's worked with Phoenix Suns, and he has a section called like brushing your teeth. And it's just like, it's something that, again, it's, you wake up every morning and you do it, and it's not usually the funnest thing to do in the day, but it's a necessity, right? Otherwise you're going to go out, breath stinks, whatever, teeth decay, all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like the necessity of the foundations that you need to build. I think, to be honest, when I think about putting together workouts, so it's not just boring, so it's not just kind of like the same old drills that kids kind of get tired of. I think, like the way Sam broke it down, I really do think there's essentially that importance of having kind of that skill development phase where they're doing drills that maybe are repetitive. They're focusing on certain, how hard they're dribbling the ball, or, how fast it's going, all that kind of stuff. But I think it needs to really move into a phase of the competition phase, because it's how you really put those things together. And I think the end goal, like you said, is to integrate that, right? And I think that's where people, kind of miss the mark a little bit of how do you integrate these skills into real life game situations. And I think that really comes through competition. So, for me, the way that I look at that is, we give them the drills, and, I would say for, even a couple weeks, we're doing these drills, and they're kind of like, they're getting a little bit better, but it gets to a point where it's like plateaued now. Like, okay, I think this is the best that I'm going to do at this 6-cone drill, But then what you kind of do, take away the cones now, and it's like, okay, put them in a live situation where they have to make the reads off of, that specific drill. And a lot of times that could be, I guess the next phase would be like showing them and teaching them, okay, well, if a defender's coming out like this is what you use this for. So again, they're starting to build that mental image. And then now it's like, okay, let's put them in live defense where they have to act this out. And are they able to do it? And then, if not, and the defense reacts, now what's the counter to that? And so, I think it's kind of going a little bit now farther off of a plan and a topic. But I think really what that does is it makes the skills applicable, which I think takes away the boringness of it, if that makes sense. I think seeing how it can apply into a game situation and how it really, in the end, lines up back to their goals and dreams of, being able to, be a D1 athlete, being able to compete and, be a top point guard in the conference. Those skills now start to line up along with kind of the read and the approach, and then also, again, the dreams and the goals ultimately. For me, I'm like, whenever kids tell me, oh, it gets boring, I'm like, well, put some music on then. It's like, do something that'll help motivate you. It doesn't have to be like rocket science as far as some crazy, get in like all kinds of tools and noodles and noodles are fun, but sometimes you just got to put on a good song, get your favorite playlist, put it on, and something that motivates you. And I think that can help alleviate the boringness of it, simple solutions. It doesn't have to be anything great. But, yeah.
I agree with you. And I think the piece that he said that was smart was, you have to be mentally engaged as well.
Right.
So you can self-evaluate as you're going through the skill with no defense or whatever. It's, but that mental engagement, I think, goes along with what you're saying there with, boredom tends to let your mind go somewhere else where, are you going to be disciplined enough to stay mentally engaged on the thing that you're doing? But yeah, that's a tough thing to teach. But your process from beginning to end, I think, again, is helpful, especially if you're reminding your athletes that's what the process is.
For sure.
Gavin, you have a question for her?
Well, I just kind of want to kind of pile on a little bit about the boring concept, just because, early in my coaching career, I got the privilege to not coach, but be like an assistant manager. I was basically a gopher, like go for this, go for that, for the Los Angeles Lakers when they had their training camp in Hawaii. And no joke, I was working and I actually got paid to do it, but I was just a sponge. Every day I Xerox copied the practice plan for Phil Jackson. So make no doubt, I copied one for myself as well, and that's in the files somewhere. But just the things that I learned about they weren't concerned with the boring. After a 2-hour practice, you have Kobe Bryant going to lift weights. Then he comes back for another hour, and I'm not joking you. He worked on catching the ball at the wing, open pivot, and rip through for either a jump shot or a finish at the rim for an hour. One move, one pivot, and he just mastered it. And I'm just like, thinking I'm going to see all these different things. And I'm like, whoa, like he's just working on one thing. Another player on that team, Lindsey Hunter, who was towards the end of his career, he was a defensive specialist and a knockdown 3-point shot. On their day off, he asked if I would go rebound for him. And I rebounded for him for 2 hours. The next day, I needed ice for my forearms because I was the one passing the ball back to him. But all he did was make 150 shots from each of those spots around the horn. And boring. There was no music. There was no nothing. But he just, he attacked that with a mindset and a mentality that, this is what I need to put food on the table for my family. And I'm going to be the best at it. So, yes, I know we as a staff spend a lot of time trying to create, the same drill, but just put a little smoke and mirrors on it so our kids don't get boring. But at the end of the day, it is what it is, right? So I would say, Grace, when you do your skill development, player development, how much of it is you and the coaching staff are directing it, or are there moments when you can go to a player and be like, hey, for the next 20 minutes, what do you want to work on? Or is it kind of an open dialogue where they can kind of get a feel of ownership and that in a way could motivate them? How much of that are you guys doing?
Yeah. If I'm being honest, this is, since we just wrapped up season 1 a little bit for us, I kind of am a little bit newer to our process. We're still in development of what that looks like. But, I think for me, I've always taken an individualistic approach to player development where it's not the same for everybody. And so there are times in our breakouts where, we have the guards and maybe we're working on a specific skill. So for example, we run like a screen and roll offense. And so really working on a specific option off the screen and roll. If they're, if a defender is, following over the top of a screen, then we're really working on our ability to come off the screen, set them up and then pull up. Let's just say that's a skill. And so in the group setting, that could be what we're working on and kind of building that out. But I think it's really important to have those individual conversations with each player on, what is your skill within what we're running offensively? And how can we build on you being successful, making an impact? Because at the end of the day, what these kids really want is they want to be able to have an impact in the game, right? And so, if I'm just running them through a drill of, hey, do this pull-up jumper, which we know is, kind of not the greatest percentage in college women's basketball as far as shot selection, maybe that's not the shot we want them taking all the time. And so being individualistic in the approach of, hey, these are your strengths are getting to the basket and not so much a pull-up, then maybe having them work on those skills within the drill instead of, something that's general for everybody. But I think there's, to a degree, there has to be a little bit of the buy-in and the ownership. And I think, especially when you get to this level, kids are skilled, they're smart, they know who they are, to a degree. They know their strengths, their weaknesses. But I think it's really, as a coach, it's now breaking that down on how they can make an impact within what you're running, offensively and defensively. It's okay, well, you have these skills and you know who you are, but this is how you've been most efficient. And that's, obviously you could see that through film, you could see that through their statistics, all that kind of stuff. So I feel like there has to be like a balance of both, where it is kind of, again, skill development, but a lot of it is, individualistic. I think you have to be careful a little bit with the buy-in piece of allowing them to kind of tell you, oh, well, this is what, I think, and giving them the ownership, because sometimes that might not be within what you're trying to accomplish, as a staff. And I mean, obviously we have so much experience with, the other coaches on staff as well, who might see things, and I'm always very collaborative. And so I love to be able to kind of know ideas and what people think, and kind of how we can collectively come up with plans for our kids. But I think when it comes to the players specifically, I take that a little bit with more caution, because I think we know the overall picture of what it's supposed to look like, and kind of how they play a part in that. So it's more of determining the role and teaching them that.
That's awesome. I love how you frame that. Kind of think it ties into something that Sam alluded to and Gavin sort of talked about, is really mirroring the why we're doing what we're doing. And it's like a skill we talk about, like in business. Well, what's your why? Or in coaching, what's your why? And we've talked about it on the show before, that our transformational mentality and something bigger than actually that moment. And just, I think maybe that's the thing. And Sam started it in his segment when we talked about, he's going to spend maybe 5, maybe 15 minutes figuring out what makes this person tick before we even start bouncing the ball. And I think you sort of touched on it, Grace and Gavin, a little bit there, is like, what is the why within the framework of the program that kid is in? And sort of maybe that's our role as coaches, to help shepherd that and get them to be intentional. And you mentioned that word buy-in, but then they are almost buying in on themselves within the framework of the specific program and the needs that they need to fill there. So I loved how you framed that, Grace. I think that really sort of helped kind of bookend everything that we've sort of been talking about and whatnot. I mentioned it too, and Gavin, we mentioned it off air, but I appreciated the question you had for Sam too. And I think some of that, it's almost like you're having a free extra assistant as a college program if you can engage that skill trainer a little bit, and I liked how Sam's response to your question was, hey, yeah, my job is to coordinate and work with that college coach so that we can sort of get their why surrounded and have it be, when I'm working with them, it's the why, what that college program means. So I loved all that part of our conversation today. And hopefully we can have Sam back on down the road and dig down more in this area. It's such an important part. I'm going to go to Brian, because Brian, you always have, if you follow folks, if you don't follow Vero on the Insta and the poses, and I don't know of another, barely 40-year-old Brian that has got better Instagram game than Brian Rosario. So, and the man, you guys need to be on his story and follow what he's got going. So not boring is his middle name. And Gav and Tony, we've spent many a not boring time with them, but Brian, like, talk about that and that mentality and where that maybe came from as you kind of go. We spin it over to you, but I think that was an important thing that we, and Grace touched on it too. Like, it doesn't have to be boring. Let's get to the competitive part. That corner starts ticking off the box of, if we can compete, and that's not boring. We all love competition, and so if we can transformation those skills, and so just talk about some of the things maybe that, you used and your mindset with that.
Well, first of all, thank you for stroking my ego. You don't have to do that, but I here's the thing that, we all have our stories and we all have our experiences of how we were developed and like who invested into us and who taught us, right? I don't think there's a right or wrong way necessarily, but player development is hard. Like, it's hard because you're literally, whether you're a position coach and you got 3 or 4 players, or if it's an individual and you just have the one, to develop a plan, to execute the plan, and to keep that individual inspired is hard over time, over a 4-year career, and then beyond. right? Like it's not as easy of just saying, okay, you're going to do these 3 dribbling drills, then we're going to go into shooting, then we're going to go into defense. Like, to me, that's what makes it boring, because the conversation goes from here's how I'm going to create 4 more points in your game to let's do all of this stuff, right? And I think that's the one thing that as coaches, as player development coaches, we are trainers as well, you know, and why are players going to trainers? Well, because of Gavin's point, hours, right? We're limited. But the other thing is maybe we're not feeding them the right way, right? Because I think there's pieces where if players are coming to you saying, hey, I need a new drill, and I'm like, and I go back to them, well, what is your trainer doing? Nah, they're just not, that trainer's not feeding them, right? And I think trainers they're probably not going to like this, so I'm just going to say it. They have moved the needle in a direction where they are being compensated. So the compensation has to show for the pace of drills and the pace of everything else. And that's why there are noodles and balls and cones and, you know, boxes and spin moves and all that stuff that doesn't correlate to your offense, right? And so I think, you know, the unique thing that we have as coaches is we can always go back to the offense. We can always go back to how those players are within our offense and literally improving 4 points on a player's line that now they're reaching 20 and they may start getting looks of player of the year candidacy. Like it's, to me, it's that piece, right? And it's not, it's hard stuff. And I think the relational side is understanding what the player wants, to Grace's point. But at the same time, I think it's also that player needs to look under the hood a little bit as to what the offense can do over time, what these coaches can do over time, and then how that can relate to some of the aspirations that are beyond college. So, you know, to me, I think that's where we have to go. And especially young coaches, I think don't get fogged because there's trainers. Like, literally create the relationship with your players, allow them to have the conversation with you as to where they want to go. And then you set the course of getting them there. Don't get caught up in like, well, you got trainers, you got 18 trainers, you got whatever it is. Be their coach, feed them, keep them inspired so that they do come to you in those times. And I think that's the biggest thing that we can serve our players over. Tony, what do you have to close us out?
I agree with you, B. And I think that's one of the big things, too, we talked about is don't forget your why and when. And I think, again, we always got to take it back to this why. And one of the things that, you know, the last couple of years for me that has become more and more prevalent is we're very good as coaches because we want to teach and we want to share and we want to give information and knowledge. So we want to tell people why you do this drill, or you want to tell them why you do this, or tell them why you do that. But what I've learned, I think, through time, and especially coaching some younger players, is that the more questions you can ask them so that they're answering to you, they're telling you why they're doing it, means you're getting them to think critically about what's happening. And it's not just to go through the motions and perfect the drill in a vacuum. It's not any of those things. It's, oh, I'm doing this because when that help defender comes, I know I've got to, you know, or whatever it is. But the why has to be important. And if you're not starting with the why in the drill work or whatever it is, you're going to have issues. And again, some of it goes to these with the fact that the information is here, but that's a huge piece of it is if you don't start with the why, then again, you're just doing a drill in the vacuum because there's no context. So that's our show for today. So I hope everybody got to learn a little bit about what we're talking about with skill development, player development with trainers, using a trainer versus not using a trainer, maybe how you can develop a plan for yourself. And I do think we'll revisit this conversation at another time. But we wanted to at least start the conversation as we get ready to work with athletes, maybe again here in the next couple of months. So again, thank you very much to our guests, Sam Allen and Grace Ricafranca, for coming out today and sharing your views on player development and just building the best players we can build. And we'll see you next time from the bench.